Diversity, equity, inclusion, brainwashing is worse than you think. I'm Cheryl Chumley, and this is Bold and Blunt, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. And today's topic, DEI, it's worse than you think. It's in the workplace. It's in the workplace, being seeped into the workplace in oh so subtle ways you're not supposed to notice. And if you do notice, you're not supposed to say anything about it, because if you bring it to light, bring it into the open and talk about it, well, that shows a little bit of DEI problem in itself, right? You can't talk about DEI openly and point out the ridiculous nature of it or the flawed nature of it, because that would make you intolerant, and that would mean that you need more DEI training. Before I get into all of that, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at washingtontimes.com, and wherever podcasts are offered. And I'd like to also ask you, if you do go to washingtontimes.com, scroll to the bottom of the page, find the newsletter section, click on it, and sign up for my 3 times a week newsletter. It's called Bold and Blunt with Cheryl Chumley. Comes out Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and contains my commentaries I write at the Washington Times from a Christian conservative perspective, as well as my twice weekly Tuesday and Thursday Bold and Blunt podcasts from, again, a Christian conservative perspective. Remember the days when you went to work to make money? And that was pretty much why you went to work. You didn't go to work to get DEI training, right? To learn how to be more diverse, equitable, and inclusive in your entire life. You went to work basically because if you didn't go to work, you couldn't pay your bills. So hopefully you could find a job that interested you and kept you passionate about your life, right? Something in tune with your skills and interests and all that. But even if you couldn't, you still had to pay bills. So you went to work. You go to work in the end to get a paycheck so you can pay bills, right? Well, that's all changed. We have a new world order. We have a new world out there. And in the workplace, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, is being rapidly woven into the corporate structure. Not just thrown out there as a course or two, but actually woven in so it becomes part of the culture. It changes the mindset of the employees and the hearts of the employees, and basically goes for the soul of the employees. So instead of saying this or that, they rethink it. And so they don't say that or this in the way they want to, but they couch it in terms that are softer, warmer, gentler, and maybe even decide not to say it at all. So in other words, DEI creates a workplace that is supposed to be friendlier and gentler to all, but if you really peel back that layer, what happens is it creates a workplace where employees are a little bit afraid to say what's on their mind, or a little bit afraid of speaking out as they wish, because they don't want to offend and then be reported to human resources as the cause of an offense, and then have to go through more of the DEI type training and so forth. So in preparation for this show, I just did a quick Google search on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace in 2024. And did you know, I suppose if I had thought about this at any length before doing that Google search, maybe I would have known this, but I didn't. So did you know that there are all these companies out there that their whole mission is to offer DEI training for businesses, so those businesses can then blossom in the DEI department in their own corporate structure? There are DEI experts that just specifically tell corporations how to put DEI in place, and not in an obvious manner. They basically say that they want to do it, so they change the mindset of employees in the corporation. So it's this soft, subtle, sly, snaky, sneaky change that comes over. It's a brainwashing, right? It's a great tool if you're a communist, but in America, we kind of go slow on that type of pressure. Anyhow, this one company, I'm not going to say the name of the company just because I don't want to give them any business, but on their webpage, they put things like this. Only 43% of employees believe they can be their authentic selves at work. So the reason they put this on their webpage is because they're trying to promote the services they can offer to counter that 43% figure. To say that, did you know that only 43% of employees think they can be their authentic selves at work? As if that's a negative, as if hurry up and do something about that because we can't have that in our workplace. And so I read that only 43% of employees believe they can be their authentic selves at work. And I think, who gives a beep, right? So what? You're not there on the job to be your authentic self, whatever that means. That sounds like some leftover hippie bullcrap. But the idea of going to work each day to be your authentic self as your purpose, I don't know. You might want to rethink that. It sounds like a loser of a platform to base your life on. I don't wake up every day that I go to work at the Washington Times and plan my workday by what can I do to be my authentic self? And then if I find walls in the way, stumbling blocks in the way of being my authentic self on my workday at the Washington Times, I certainly don't turn to my bosses or HR department and complain that, hey, you've got X, Y, and Z in place and it's preventing me from being my authentic self at work. And then expect my bosses at the Washington Times or HR to do something about it. The premise of this corporate statement, only 43% of employees believe they can be their authentic selves at work. The premise that it's pushing forward as if that's a problem that demands a workplace solution from the executives is ridiculous to me. Anyhow, moving on, 69% of employees report that genders do not get equal discussion time in meetings. Okay, I sort of find this hard to believe. So is it because I assume what they mean here? Well, there are a couple of assumptions. At first, I was going to say, I assume what they mean here is they're talking about women being in career fields where perhaps are male-dominated, or perhaps there are males in the room that do more of the talking, and these women feel, right? Not really based on data. They just have some emotion where they feel as if they're being shut out of the debate and discussion. So that was my initial reaction. But then I remembered the world we live in, the new world order we live in, and you have to read carefully. 69% of employees report that genders do not get equal discussion time in meetings. And you have to realize they're probably, in this particular context here, talking about more than male and female, right? They're probably looping in all those she, it, he, them, their, theys, whatever crap is floating out there in the gender world, right? They're probably talking about that. In which case, yeah, they don't get equal discussion time because they're not equally represented. It's not like we've got a world made up of 25% men, 25% women, 25% its, and 25% theys. And then that world automatically means that 25% of each of these genders, only two of which are real, by the way, are represented in the corporate world, right? It's not equally dispersed that way. And then to expect that corporations do something to allow all these genders, both real and imagined, to have equal speaking time in meetings. I don't know. If you have a mouth and you have a voice, it seems to me that the playing field is already equal. What more do you want your company to do? 69% say genders don't get equal discussion time. 31% genders do get equal discussion time. In meetings we're talking about. Like I said, if you have a voice and you have a mouth, then the playing field is already equal. What more do you want? I suppose we could just pass around a microphone like we're in kindergarten and put a time on it. 60 seconds, you're allowed 60 seconds. Whether you want to say something or not, you have to say something for 60 seconds. And then we get everybody just coming up with something to say, 60 seconds, just so we can report to the DEI overlords, right? That, hey, we give equal amount of speaking time to all the genders, both the real ones and the imagined. So scrolling down, right, you look at some of the offerings this company puts out there for other companies to pay for. And they also have this link, book a demo, so you can click on it and you can see DEI being pressured into the workforce at work. And some of the offerings, some of the special diversity and inclusion courses are titled Inclusive Language. This course explores inclusive language, its definition, importance, principles, and best practices for feedback and self-correction, right? Self-correction. So I suppose I'm in need of a little bit of self-correction right now because I dared to say that there are only two genders and the other ones are fake and fabricated. So probably that offends somebody. So probably right now somebody is out there covering their ears and wailing into the air because I've offended them. But good thing there are companies out there to teach me how to self-correct and to teach you how to self-correct, right? Okay, so here's the next course description. Workplace Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Training Course. Allow everyone to be their authentic selves. Well, you know what? Let's click on that and find out if they define authentic self, because that's such a weird term. Stakeholders. Oh, here we go. I'm reading from this now, okay? And they renamed this. They renamed Workplace Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion DEI Training Course. It used to be named Inclusion and Belonging Training because, after all, when you go to work, your number one purpose for being there is to belong. It's not to make money. It's not to make the company money. It's not to provide a good and service that translates well in the free market and prospers the company and by trickle-down economics, right? You, yourself. No, it's to belong. Stakeholders, I'm reading from this now, view diversity not just as a reflection of organizational values and a means of fostering positive, yawn. The important word here is stakeholders. As soon as I saw that, bing, 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 this is coming from places like the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab with his Great Reset type of idea that trickles into America's corporate world through organizations like the Business Roundtable, which is your grouping of most influential, largest corporations in America, that they all sign on to this pledge to operate their businesses in the way that the Business Roundtable actually puts in print in a document, in a print document to sign. And The Business Roundtable in recent years have taken their marching orders directly from the Klaus Schwab Great Reset crowd, and they have changed the mission and purpose of a business from one of pleasing shareholders and profiting shareholders and self, right? Shareholders being the ones who have an actual financial investment in the business, to pleasing what's called stakeholders, which in a very layman's definition is anyone and everyone who can claim having a stake in that business. Black Lives Matter can claim a stake. Radical environmentalists can claim a stake. This is where your DEI crap comes from, because we've shifted in this country from capitalism and free market, right, where it's all about profit and loss, which is very honest, by the way, very honest. If I produce a product that you want, you will pay me for that product. And we both have an exchange that we're happy with. You get the product, I get the profit from making the product. If I produce a product that sucks and you don't buy it, that sends the message to me that my product sucks, and in order to compete, in order to survive, in order to provide for myself and family, I better come up with a better product. So it's very honest and very genuine, and it's very difficult to manipulate, because you can't convince a consumer that a sucky product is great if that consumer doesn't want to be convinced of it, right? My salesman tactics aren't so great that I can sell sucky products. I have to do something good. And that's how most people work, right? It's very, very honest, very genuine, hard to manipulate. Stakeholder capitalism, right? When you take out the profit loss from it and make it all about the social agenda, the social justice, the social welfare, the social health, environmentalism. When you say that companies have a responsibility to not only make money, but also they have to do it in an environmentally conscious manner. They have to do it in a way that doesn't offend Antifa types and Black Lives Matter types. They have to do it in a way that's sensitive to not just women, the so-called weaker gender, right? But all the genders out there, all the lunatic fringe, he, she, it, they, thems, or whatever, who like to put it on their name badges, right? They like to put their names, right? Ashley, which could be male or female, or some other androgynous name. They like to put that there, and then beneath it, right? You go into your grocery stores now, they like to put he, him, or they, them, as if you're supposed to applaud them for their stupid name tag that just really is a display of ignorance and nothing else. But anyhow, back to the word stakeholders. So the stakeholder term, this stakeholder terminology comes from Klaus Schwab, Great Reset, World Economic Forum crowd, with the intent of reshaping the markets and economies of the world. Instead of being about profit and loss, which is tough for them to navigate, to manipulate and to control, they want economies of the world to be driven by social justice and social agendas, because that means that somebody can control how companies do business. You can't just look at your profit loss statement anymore and say, oh, we need to adjust to make more profit. No, you have to listen to the thugs bleeding in the streets and screaming outside your office doors that you're not doing enough to recognize the rights of the LGBTQ plus minus parentheses whatever crowd. And then you have to adjust your business accordingly, usually by throwing them some money. Usually when you throw money at these special agendas, they go quietly off and they go buy their cannabis and they smoke it in their mom's basements for a while. And they only come out after they run out of their stash. But that's how they're appeased. So stakeholders, that is the word of interest here. That is a foundation of diversity, equity, and inclusion seeping into America's workforce, into America's corporate culture. And mark these words, if we don't stop this runaway train, our free market will crumble from within. And I have a guest today who can speak even more to this all-important issue. Our time's ticking on this, right? We've got a puppet president in the White House who is steamrolling the same type of agenda through the federal government, through the federal contract system. And it's weaving into the Democrat-controlled communities in America. And corporations afraid of offending somebody, right, who with a billboard, or somebody with signs that they can parade out in front of their offices, they are voluntarily giving up their free market way of thinking, their capitalistic model, their shareholder model, to jump aboard this stakeholder model because they think that's the way to survive in this coming New World Order. So my guest today, Kent Heckenlively, he's written a book about DEI, and he's here to talk more about how it's even worse than you think. Kent, thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, because you say that it's worse than we even imagine or realize. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, our new book, The Diversity Con, that I wrote with Project Veritas whistleblower David Johnson, originally came about because David Johnson, a young center-left black man, went to work for Hasbro Corporation as a packaging engineer, and within his first week was told that he had to watch this diversity training in which they informed him that babies as young as 6 months old can be racist, and his job as a packaging engineer was to slip subliminal messages into the toys over the heads of the parents. He found this to be a terrifying proposition, and so he recorded that training and passed it along to Project Veritas, and that really created an amazing outcry and led him and me to write this book, The Diversity Con, because we felt we needed to go deeper into this question.
How can it be, by any stretch of the imagination, that someone could arrive at the idea that 6-month-old babies can be racist?
It's really a remarkable idea. And, I think what is interesting for David is, he's in his mid-20s, and so here he is supposedly a put-upon minority, and he says the America presented in that training session was not the America that he grew up in. And so he found it really terrifying because he believed very strongly in the ideals of Martin Luther King Jr., that the content of your character and your accomplishments are not what matter, not the color of your skin. And so with our great publisher, Bombardier Press, what we did was David went undercover at several of these diversity trainings to find out how they are, brainwashing people, because, we all want to do the right thing. We all want to be nice to each other. But how is it that this crazy ideology is being perpetrated?
And I want to get into more specifics about that. But first, I want to ask, is there anything in your research or your co-author's research that finds that this DEI movement is coming in any way from Republicans, from conservatives? Is it simply driven by the left, or are there spots of Republicans and conservatives that we have to watch out for as well?
Well, that's a great question, because I think that what we saw in the sessions that he went to is that, they don't start out being crazy. So let's imagine you're going to a 3-day diversity training. Well, day one will probably be a lot of interesting information, parts of American history that you may not know about. So maybe things like the Tulsa race riots, where 60 years after the end of slavery, African Americans in the Midwest were doing really well, and then there was a riot and their community was burnt to the ground. So, it starts out with some good information. Day two is where it gets kind of a little bit on the edge. They give you some provocative ideas. Day 3 is where it goes absolutely bonkers, and you hear the transgender agenda is pushed, lower the age of consent for sexual activity, maybe to 14, maybe to 12 years old, all this crazy sort of stuff. So it really is understandable how people of goodwill can be sucked in by this brainwashing. So I do think that there are Republicans who get sucked into it, and it's not. It's something that is seductive in a certain way because we all want to be good people. But what you have to do is say, look at the effects. Look at how this completely destroys civilization, destroys community between people. Because the fact of the matter is we're more alike than we're different. I mean, what was really interesting in our looking at the segregation laws of the South was it wasn't just that they didn't want people of different races to marry. They didn't even want a black man and a white man to play a game of checkers together. Now, why is it that you would keep people so separated that they couldn't even play a game of checkers? Well, it's because that once we sit across the table from each other and engage from each other, we find out we're more alike than we're different. And so the thing that we fear is that this diversity con is resegregating American society in a way that generations of civil rights leaders have tried to avoid.
Because in the end, it's really sort of creating oppressed versus oppressor, right? Which is pure Marxism.
Yeah, and so that was another thing that we found very troubling was David would go to these training sessions, and at some point they would start using Marxist language like oppressed and oppressor classes. Target victim is another variation of that. And, when your only choices are to be a bad person or a person who is abused, that's not really a healthy dynamic. And that led us to one of the big questions of the book, which was these diversity trainings seem to be, shot through with Marxism and Marxist ideology, and you can go to public statements of people like Patrice Cuéllar's of Black Lives Matter that they are trained Marxists, and that presented a quandary to us because we said these programs seem to be incredibly well funded, and so how is it that rich people are paying for Marxism? And so that led us to, I think, who's the real villain of the book, which is a group called the Tides Foundation out of San Francisco, California, which was founded in the late 1970s by a Democratic activist. And it's got a really interesting legal structure, which is that they have a whole bunch of funds that if you're a rich guy, you can put money into. And then you can also direct money to certain organizations. And the money doesn't come from you, the rich guy. It comes from the Tides Foundation. And so using publicly available data, we looked at the financial records of the Tides Foundation. And, so it's supposed to be a nonprofit foundation. And in the 2020 election cycle, they gave out over $600 million in grants to groups like Black Lives Matter. And it really seemed like this is really a left-wing money laundering chaos machine. And when you look at the list of their donors, you get people like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, you get the George Soros Open Society Foundation, kind of all the usual suspects. But this is a huge money laundering operation designed to affect political change in the United States. And, I think the COVID-19 crisis was a real great example of what the plan might be, which is during that, $4 trillion went from the middle class to the billionaire class. And so it seems to us that this is the real grift that's going on, which is the rich guys who control Google, Facebook, Amazon, all these other groups. They're promoting this societal instability, destroying local communities. So we stay segregated in our houses and only order things online and don't go out to restaurants and movies and shop local communities.
So some of these private companies out here, Disney, let's look at Disney, right? A private company lost money because of its woke agenda and DEI policies and so forth. How is it because of the foundation support, Tides Foundation? And I'm sure you can find what is it, George Soros, Open Society? Yes. I'm sure you can find a lot more foundations outside of Tides that do the same thing that you just described Tides does. But how do these private companies that are pushing these woke agendas and DEI agendas stay in business? If they're losing money, they must be getting it elsewhere. Are the foundations tied to propping up the private sector when they lose money from consumers who awaken to the wokeism and stop shopping there?
It's a really great question. The problem with the grift is it works until it doesn't. And I think that's why books like the Diversity Con are so important, and other outlets which are exposing this, which is this stuff is very fragile. And so when attention gets focused on it, it's amazing how quickly things can fall apart. I think a perfect example is the 3 Ivy League presidents who appeared before Congress in wake of the attacks in Israel, and they could not even condone calls for genocide on their campus. And so when the spotlight gets shown on these people, things can fall apart quickly. And so that's why I think that programs like this are so important, because you're shining the light on things. And once people get motivated, it only takes a relatively small amount of people talking out for things to start to change.
That's optimistic. So let's finish with a question about solutions, because I'm sure in your book, The Diversity Con, The Secrets and Lies Behind the DEI Industry, fantastic title, by the way, I'm sure you go into some solutions, how the average American can fight, because at this point in time, I think a lot of us are aware of the agendas that are taking place, but it's even in the military. So what can an individual do right now outside of, I'm not going to shop at Target anymore, or I'm not going to shop at, business X? What else can we do?
Well, it's kind of interesting, because if their goal is to separate us from each other, then and really be anti-human, our response should be as pro-human as possible. So go out and have friends, connect with people, go shopping at your local business, your local mall. What they're trying to do is they're trying to scare us into being isolated from each other. And what we should be doing is we should be going out and actively engaging. Try to make more friends in 2024. Okay? Don't sit inside your bubble. Don't sit inside your house stewing. Have positive human relations. And it's through having those positive human relations that I think we're going to defeat these people who I really think are very anti-human. I mean, I have a wide number of friends. I have an amazing diversity of friends. But I have them because they're interesting people, not because I'm checking off some box.
That's a really good solution, because it fits into the narrative and the agenda of how globalists are trying to push artificial intelligence and transhumanism and keep everybody in their homes and so forth. So that cuts right to the heart of the dehumanizing attempt of the far left. And you're right. The way to counter that is to get more human. So, Kent, I really appreciate you coming on and discussing this issue. Best of luck with your book, The Diversity Con. It sounds a fantastic, crucial read right now. Where can people get it?
You can get it on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, any of the place you buy books online, Books A Million. It's at all the places. So, sometimes one of the problems is the bookstores kind of shut us out. So you need to get it online. You can check out, buy it through my website, KentHeckenlivelybooks.com, or you can follow me on Twitter.
Excellent. KentHeckenlivelybooks.com for the DiversityCon. I want to thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. Have a great day. I appreciate your time.
All right, thank you.
If you like Bold and Blunt, remember you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at washingtontimes.com, at Real Life Network, and wherever podcasts are offered. Tune in next time. In the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay